Yeah, look, we did a lot of preparation for the trade period. You meet with clubs well in advance of the trade period. We're obviously in a difficult situation that we're also trying to retain the players. Like it wasn't our desire to trade the players out, so we were talking with them all the way up to the lead up through to the trade period to try and keep them on our list. Unfortunately, that wasn't successful. So it was really through the discussions with other clubs and then coming back and talking about what our options were likely to be. Obviously, clubs, they would rather pay less than more when it comes to trades for players. So there was a fair bit of work in terms of trying to generate competition for players. And I think that's something we did. That in most cases, clubs were talking about third round draft picks, but through generating a bit of competition between clubs for players, they had to be a little bit more realistic. We would have liked better in some instances, but we just weren't able to get that. Look, it was every trade period's been pretty busy because the unfortunate reality is every year we've been involved in some reasonably significant trading. So my first year here it was Jared Brennan, and that took a fair bit of time. And second year it was obviously Mitch Clark. So this year, in terms of workload, look, it was fairly intense. It was pretty much 3 weeks of that's all you were doing really, was talking to clubs, talking to people internally about our situation, trying to come up with strategies that might help us, putting offers to other clubs in terms of the way you might be able to slide picks in a manner that helps them but gets us up the order. So it's 3 very, very busy weeks, and when you look at the outcomes, you think, well, it doesn't quite equate to how much work goes into it, but you're obviously always trying to better Brisbane's position. Look, we'd had offers and been talking to player agents about those players from early in the year. So we'd done a lot of work, had a lot of discussion, and even when they were saying no, I want to go home, we were going back, and once Justin Lepich was appointed, Justin sat down with each player and spoke to him about his game plan and where he saw the player fitting in. We'd been speaking to agents and the like, but in the end you can't force a player to sign. So we certainly did all we could to try and retain those players, and I can honestly say I don't think there's much more we could have done. Well, Jono were able to secure through the academy bidding process. We probably had made the decision that we wouldn't use a second round pick if that was what it was required. So we're pretty happy that we didn't have to use that, and we had to use I think it was a 4th round pick in the finish. In terms of Jono, I think we've got real value in using a 4th round pick for him, and I hope that's one of the benefits of the academy going forward, is that we're able to get players a little later than what we might have had to if we'd used a draft selection. Luke's been keen to come to Brisbane on more than one occasion. In terms of this year, we really needed to wait and see how our lists looked at the end. We obviously knew we had a number of players going out, and we weren't sure what we'd get in terms of the final result with players and draft picks. So we wanted to leave things as open as we could, and the benefit of free agency is there's obviously a couple of free agency periods, so there's no rush to bring a free agent in at the start of the trading period. No, the club didn't shop Tom around. I think the Tom Rockcliffe rumour came from Melbourne wanting to inquire about whether they might be able to secure Tom through a trade, and we didn't entertain that at any stage. Obviously spoke to Tom's manager to ask the question, well, where is this coming from? And it wasn't coming from them either. It was just Melbourne hoping to use that pick 2 for a mature aged midfielder, but we certainly weren't prepared to move any of our midfield group. Pick number 1 from GWS, there's been a lot of publicity around that, but I'm not sure that there was ever any real intent to trade pick number 1 on their behalf. Maybe if you'd offered a package like Leuenberg and Rockcliffe, you might get pick number 1, but we were certainly never going to do anything along those lines. I think when you've got players who have been with the club and developed, you want to keep them at the club, and they're certainly part of our core group. So there was no thought from our end that we'd ever entertain the sorts of players that GWS would be seeking for that pick number 1. Yeah, well, the trade with Billy Longer and Hawthorn, there had been a lot of discussion prior to the trade period. You generally always meet with clubs before the trade period commences and get a bit of a feel for what clubs might be prepared to trade in terms of picks or players. Hawthorn had indicated before the trade period that they were fairly keen on trading for Billy. During the trading process, or during the first day of trade, they spoke about early pick in the 20s. I think they felt they'd probably get a Melbourne's second round pick as part of a trade, possibly for Shane Savage, and that's all they were prepared to offer. And they didn't even actually offer that on that first day. That was just the talk. We said we'd want one of their first round picks, because we knew they were going to get pick 17, they had pick 17 and they were going to get pick 18 for the compensation pick. And where that sort of parlayed into our strategy was, we knew that if we could get an early pick, we could then slide picks with Port Adelaide to get their first round pick. And we were pretty keen throughout the whole trade process to try and get up to Port Adelaide's first round selection, but the only way we could do it was if Port Adelaide didn't have to slide beyond the first round, which was a constant theme from them. So it intertwined with the Jared Pollock trade, or was potentially going to. Then on the second day, when we tried to continue talks with Hawthorn, the phone suddenly went very quiet, and there was no return calls or anything like that. And I thought, something's up here. And then it was the next morning we learnt about the McAvoy trade, and the ultimate impact of that one was there's also an agreement that Hawthorn would slide their first and second round. They'd slide their compensation pick with St Kilda's second round pick, which also hurt us because we'd been talking to Hawthorn about doing a deal after the Longer trade, which might enable us to get that compensation pick and then hence end up with the 14 from Port Adelaide. But when the AFL passed that second trade, that was removed from the table. You only want to trade for a player if you think the player's got something to add to you. And one of the other challenges is players. Often players are in contract at the end of the year. It's desirable for clubs to have your players in contract if you want to retain them. We did inquire about David Armitage, and I think from St Kilda, and had spoken to his management and the like. In the end, St Kilda wasn't prepared to trade for David, so that one fell over. As far as the other clubs go, there was players thrown up at us, but you've got to look at each player in the context of your list, and obviously lots of consultation with Justin about the sorts of players that were being offered to us. Had we traded with Adelaide, it would have had to have been a player. So in many cases, we probably had a preference for picks, but obviously with Patrick Karnesis, we did see that a player like Jackson Payne fitted a need for us in terms of being a tall forward, big, strong young fella who with some work we hope can develop into a part of our forward line down the track. So that's where we saw a player who potentially filled a need for us, and we're prepared to do a player trade there. Overall, we were hopeful that we might be able to package up a few picks and get up the draft order, but that didn't eventuate for us.